Do you want to introduce yourself then?
Absolutely. Okay. Yep. So, my name's Anarchiosis. I'm a small YouTuber, basically. A couple months ago, I decided to make a YouTube channel just because I was really interested in philosophy and economics. Um, so yeah, basically, I've been getting into the YouTube sphere. I basically watch a lot of debates and politics all my life, and I decided to finally make the jump and start talking to people. And so, I watched a lot of your videos, and I want to have discussions with lots of people. I talked with Sithis. I'm going to talk with Fabian Liberty at some point, and I'm talking to you now. So, yeah.
Cool. So you had a problem with my justification of the non-aggression principle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so, yeah, I mean, to be clear, I don't know how long it'll take for us to do this. Probably not very long, but I've got a few topics just in case we do finish this early. But with that being said, I can go ahead and give you my case why I have a problem with the NAP justification. So let me start by saying that I'm an anarchist. So obviously, I agree with the NAP. But here's my problem. I think that the NAP is the best practical solution for economics and politics, but I'm not convinced that it's the best morals. I'm not convinced that it has any moral justification for it. So I basically went through all the moral justifications, and since we're not going to have an argument about practicality, we can make this strictly morally justified. So I'm interested in hearing your case for moral justifications, if you have any, unless you agree with me in which the case that you just agree with the practicality of the NEP and not just the moral justifications of it.
Sure. I think I do have a moral justification. Um, the basic argument is that uh, because we have this thing called scarcity, people can come into conflicts, right? Crusoe and Friday can try and use the same stick for counter ends at the same time. Can't both happen at the same time, so that's conflict, right? Um, there are three ways we could go about trying to solve this as ethical philosophers. We could use the law of the jungle, where it's just like anything goes, might makes right. Who cares about trying to resolve conflicts, that type of thing. Then there's the non-aggression principle, which says that the person who initiated the conflict there should not be the one who is able to go forth. And then there's the mixed law, the system which is just some in between. And I think both the law of the jungle and mixed law um, fall into what I call the primacy of consciousness, which is a stolen concept fallacy. So because those are both out, we're left with only the NEP as the reasonable solution to law.
Yeah, no, I agree with you about the law, but wouldn't you say that the law is practical, not moral?
No, I would say the law is moral. I don't think there is. I don't think something can be practical but not moral
Oh, so
either.
you see them as the same thing.
And moreover, that if I don't see like a dichotomy where it's like, okay, well, we've got to be practical here, and therefore we've got to just abandon morality. I think it is impractical to abandon morality. You're not actually going to achieve anything good if you abandon morality, because morality is specifically telling you how to live the good life.
What? So the point of morality is to live a good life, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a yeah.
Yeah.
So doesn't that just mean it's a means to an ends? If your ends is trying to live a good life, and you use morality to achieve that, isn't that just consequentialism? That's practicality, right?
No. Because what ethics is doing is it's telling you what is required to live the good life, i.e., what you should be doing. Um,
Right. It's the
that
means.
it's not, but like the ideology itself is not the means. The ethics itself isn't the means. Just as metaphysics isn't a means, but it's the theory of about how the universe is. Similarly, ethics is the theory about how man should conduct his life.
Okay. Wait. So I might be a little bit confused. So, from what I understand, you don't see a differentiation between moral in a practical sense and a intrinsic sense. I see those things as distinct because I see this as utilitarians will essentially say that moral is practical. So what we need to do is the thing that's most practical, and that's morality, meaning, like taxes, Keynesian ethics, communism, all that shit. And then there will be deontologists and moral virtue ethicists who will say that we do something because it is good. We don't do something because it's good for us. We do something because it's intrinsically good. So I see those things as distinct. I see moral practicality and moral objectivity as two distinct things.
Right. I think this is a false alternative you've given me here. You're saying either we've got to be pragmatists, and then it's all just about practicality, or we've got to be intrinsicists, where it's some sort of duty ethics. I think that's a false alternative here, because being practical doesn't mean abandoning morality. It doesn't mean doing bad things. Things can be bad without it being some sort of rule decreed onto people by God.
Okay. I mean, so I don't think practicality actually links with intrinsic morality. Practicality describes what works in the world, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what ought to be done from a moral standpoint. And that kind of brings us to the is-ought gap, doesn't it?
We can go there if you want, sure.
But like, isn't that what it does? Um, like you haven't solved the is-ought gap, have you?
No, I absolutely have,
Oh, you
and I don't think
have.
it poses any sort of problem at all. So, like, there's this argument against it called companions in guilt. So, what the is-ought gap, Hume's guillotine, right? What Hume is claiming is that, well, there you should only believe in certain things. You should only believe in things that you can see, or taste, touch, things that some reputable guy tells you about, yada 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 yada, right? He's just giving the standard sensualist claim there. But that itself is an epistemic norm. He's saying you should only believe in these things. But wait a minute, his epistemic norm here is supposed to exclude any sort of should claims. So it defeats itself. It cannot stand as any sort of attack on any morality.
Wait, so then why ought we do something?
Well, then you're asking for the positive case. So in law, I gave the basic positive case above, that the three possibilities out of the three possibilities we have, the non-aggression principle is the only one that it doesn't rely on a stolen concept. So the NEP is the only one that we have left. So it's the correct solution to law.
But for
That's the positive
example,
case for the NEP.
if so you got out of bed today. If I ask you why you got out of bed today, what would your answer be?
So I had work to do.
Why would you do work?
Oh, because if I don't do work, then I'm not producing anything, and then I'll live either as a parasite, which I think is profoundly evil, or I'll die, right? And I don't want to die, so
Okay, why don't you want to die?
well,
Or
why
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 ought
would
you
I
not
want to die,
die?
right?
What?
Why would I want to die is the question.
Well, I think of the better question is why would you want to live?
Why is that the better question?
Because when you
It would be
live,
like
you
if we
are
if we were each out. Well, it'd be
because
sort
man
of like if we
acts.
were both. It'd be sort of like if we were both out in public, and then you're like, isn't it weird right now that none of us are eating shit? Why is that? Like, I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's wouldn't that be a
we
negative?
both
My
accepted that living
question.
is good, right?
So
Yeah, it
I
would be a negative. So
specifically
dying, right?
I
Living is
specifically
good.
love when you
That's why I want
bring
to
up
live.
praxeology. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. So living is a good thing. I think clearly we both accept this. So I'm not sure where you're going to go with that.
Why is living a good thing?
Well, life is the standard of ethics. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you can't have a value which is death. That's a stolen concept. It doesn't make any sense to say that. It doesn't make any sense to you are operating on just complete utter falsehood if you are engaged in a pursuit of death. Now, I can elaborate on this. So, that you have this concept of value, we have to ask where is this a primary, or does value rely on something before it for you to even have that concept in the first place? And the answer that Ayn Rand gives, which I mean we could go into that if you wanted, but it is an NAP debate. Um, the answer that she gives is that the concept of value relies on the concept life, because it's only for living beings that value means anything at all. It's only living beings which have the alternative of existence or non-existence, so they have to pursue things, right, to keep themselves existing. That's why a rock doesn't have values, it doesn't pursue anything, because it's not alive.
Okay. Yeah, no, I that's fair.
So I would
Um,
consider, so then specifically related to your question there then, um, the alternative of keeping alive, um, living the good life, that is, um, where it's like, well, why shouldn't we pursue death? Well, that's just a stolen concept. You're pursuing something with whilst eschewing any sort of standard of value. So then, what the hell does a value mean?
yeah, that's a good question. What the hell is a value? But I think this brings us back to the question of why should we do anything? And the question kind of hints at a more fundamental, like intuitive response, right? I would say that it probably boils down to a certain intuitionism where why do we act? We act intuitively and we act purposefully, but we act purposefully based on our intuitions and our preferences. And so we need to sort of, I guess, deconstruct what that means as an intuition and see why we ought to do anything. Because, and hear me out for a second, we might disagree on this. It appears to me that the most logical outcome of life, if if your meaning in life and your purpose in life is to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, is to just choose non-existence. Because I would argue that the vast majority of people live a more painful life than a good life. So wouldn't the logical ends of that just be choosing non-existence so that you could have peace?
Well, you've gone through a few different threads there. I'll address the first one first, right? Um, I don't think that why ought we do something is just based on intuition. If somebody is acting on intuition, that means they just haven't checked their premises fully enough. The reason why we ought do things is because we are living beings, right? So we need to pursue values to stay alive, or else we go out of existence.
Okay. Um, so you said something. You said check your premises. This sounds like logic, which means that you're saying something. Logic is something that is right. Logic can't inform us what we should do unless you think you can make that case.
Why is that?
Because there's no evidence.
Why can't logic inform us of what we should do?
Because there's no evidence
There's
for it.
plenty of evidence for everything I
What's the
said here.
evidence?
What claim did I make which lacked evidence?
You haven't made a claim for why we should live.
I made it earlier. I said that the alternative is stolen concept fallacy. I evidenced that fully.
So okay, wait. So unpack this a little more. What you mean by the stolen concept fallacy? What fallacy am I committing right now?
Or so it's a conceptual fallacy rather than a logical fallacy. What it means is that you're using a concept whilst rejecting the validity of a concept on which it depends. So I can give an example, a different example outside of ethics. So you know the classic phrase from I believe Proudhon, where he says property is theft. This is an example of the stolen concept fallacy, because theft that refers to illegitimately possessing property, but then he is saying that property is itself theft, right? He's stolen the concept of property here,
Right.
or rather theft. He's done it to both. It's a little bit circular, you see.
Right, because you can't have theft without property. That makes sense.
Yeah, and he's rejecting that property as a legitimate thing. So yeah, it would be theft that he's stolen the concept of, which is funny.
Okay,
Um,
so then what did I steal a concept of when I said, why ought we live?
so you're so that specifically isn't stealing concept. I'm saying the alternative to life is the standard is stealing the concept of value. Because the concept of value, you only get to that because you have the prior concept of life. It makes no sense to have value as just this floating thing. You can't just have, because value is not the primary. So all of these ethical theorists, plenty of them at least throughout history, they've treated value as something intrinsic, which is one of the examples you gave, where it's just some command from God, do this just because. That is stealing the concept of value, because what do they actually mean by value there? It means value is when you obey God's word, right? But they've that's not what it means, right? If we actually look out and we actually observe where values come from, where we see values, we don't see values in inanimate matter. We only see it in living beings. It's only living beings that pursue things. It's only living beings that do this stuff. So it is life that is the prerequisite and standard of value. And what I mean by standard is that you need some sort of way to evaluate, right? Some way to pick what you're going to pursue, right? It can't just be whatever you want, because that is called whim worship, which rests on a whim epistemology, which is the claim that this is true because I feel like it's true, right? So the, the problem with just having a floating ought is that you need oughts aren't floating. They are rooted in this recognition of life as the standard. Anything else is just utterly meaningless.
Interesting. I mean, I'm not sure I would agree that oughts are rooted in the standard of living. But so, for example, let me walk you through something and I can get your thoughts on this. Um, okay. So, back before when we were talking, I was trying to get to something and I have to remember exactly what it was. But okay, yes. So praxeology. The first axiom in praxeology is man acts purposefully, or as you like to say, man acts, because purposefully is what is it? It's implicit in saying that. So man acts, and
Right, so I'll clarify. It depends on which sense you're using act. So metaphysicians will often say that there's an action of a balloon to float under natural atmospheric conditions, whatever, right? We can say purposely acts, that's fine, or behaves purposefully or acts. It depends on which debate you want to have right now. If we want to be in economics, then I think it's a good shorthand to just speak of action as meaning human action, because economics obviously only applies to humans, right?
right. Okay. Yeah. So man acts, and from what it appears to be, is man acts purposefully. And so this would mean that a man has a reason or a why they act. Something, but I would argue that we don't know what this is. Like obviously we know on a surface level what this is. We have values, we have whims, we have desires, things that we prefer to do, and we do those things. But are those things, what do those things all lead to? Is it pleasure or is it something else?
It's choice. So the fundamental here is choice. So the primary choice would be whether to focus or evade. Sorry, whether to focus or drift, and the secondary choice is whether to think or evade. It's from this fundamental concept of choice, free will, volition, that you get the rest. So your whims and all that, it's all going to be based on your prior choices.
It's funny that you say that because I've been trying so long to logically prove that there's pleasure and there's choice, and I'm pretty sure I debunked pleasure by saying that at the end of the day, if you seek a life of pleasure, you will end up choosing non-existence because that logically makes more sense if you're living a life of suffering. But what I can't logically prove is that man lives for choice. I can't figure out how to logically prove that.
He doesn't live for choice. That wasn't my claim.
He lives
My
to
claim
choose.
was that uh, my claim is that the basis of praxeology, these purposes that man has, that is all based in choice. So it's because man chooses. That's why he has purposes, right? And that's why praxeology doesn't apply to plants, because plants don't choose; they don't have purposes.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So, um, okay, I went through the different justifications I could figure out, which is just a bunch of different moral justifications, and I basically I basically don't find any of these as good evidence. So I have everything from natural rights to natural law to deontological ethics to moral absolutism, and you can just stop me with any of these points you want to argue with. So my problem with natural rights, and to be clear, natural rights is each individual
Well, I mean,
inherently owns themselves. Do you disagree with
it,
that?
it it might be more efficient if we just go for my justification, right?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
But I don't know what other justifications you've read. So my justification was, out of the three possible solutions to law, the NAP is the only one which is non-fallacious, so it's the correct one.
Okay, but when you say correct, what do you mean? What do you mean it's correct?
Well,
It's
the
the one that
others
reduces
are
the most amount of
incorrect.
conflict?
No, we have this problem of conflict, which so we can legitimately ask the question as ethicists, how should we deal with conflicts? The law of the jungle and mixed law both rely on fallacy, so the NAP is the only correct one. Right? It's like if I rolled a dice, a six-sided dice, and I tell you, hey, the number which appeared on the dice was not the number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Which number appeared? Clearly, you're going to go, oh, it was 6 that appeared, because I've eliminated all other possibilities. And I've done the same here. I've eliminated every other possible solution to conflict that you could ever have, leaving us with only the non aggression principle.
Okay, but this okay. So when I ask you for a moral justification for the NEP, and you say that it's the only, I guess, system that's non-contradictory. Um, what are
I'm not sure
you?
if non contradictory is the right word. Um, because it's not necessarily the case that the law of the jungle and mixed law necessarily go into contradictions. They certainly do go into a lot of contradictions. But the fundamental error to both of them is the stolen concept fallacy, which is found because they both rely on the primacy of consciousness.
Okay. Wait. So can I ask what your presuppositions are so that we can get to a base level root of this?
What do you mean by what my presuppositions are?
So do you believe in moral objectivism? I'm assuming you do, since you believe in morality.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's probably a good route for us to go. Let me see. Okay. So moral objectivism. I have my problems with moral objectivism. Moral objectivism seems to be this idea that there is intrinsic moral value, and from your perspective, it seems like you would link this with practicality.
Mm-mm-mm.
So
Hold
what?
on. Hold on. You've made a mistake there. You've conflated objective and intrinsic there. Like
No,
that there is objectively correct things in morality, that you can be objective in morality. That doesn't imply that morality is some rules coming from outside of you, just imposed upon you.
I'm confused because moral objectivism is the idea that morality exists
So,
independent of us, right? It's true in the
um,
universe.
if that is what is meant by moral objectivism, then I'm not a moral objectivist.
Oh, okay.
I'm an objectivist, and objectivism holds that you can indeed come to a rational morality.
Okay, okay. But when you again, so okay, let me tell you something I agree with, and then because maybe this is just a semantic thing, and it might just be. My presupposition for why I live is rational self-interest, right? So egoism, Ayn Rand egoism. The way I see it is,
But
I'm
yeah,
not
that's
entirely.
subjectivism.
uh,
That's my position as well.
yeah, I guess it's a form of subjectivism. Yeah, but the idea is that,
No, no,
and
no,
I'm
not
not
subjective. Objectivism,
objective. What do you mean objectivism?
like like the like the philosophy is called objectivism.
Oh yeah. Okay, sorry.
Like that's
Yes, exactly. So the way I see it is, but okay, I'll make this exception. We know that it's true that everyone is a psychological egoist. This is true, and the reason for this is because the self does what the self wants. And I've seen you made this point a million times. You cannot act against your preferences, and that is because you do what you desire. Right?
sure. If that's what is meant by psychological egoism, then it's correct.
Correct. Now here's the problem with when it comes to morality. I agree, if we're going to agree on morality being practical, then I agree with you. That is practical morality, and that's you are achieving the things that are best for yourself. But I have a problem with intrinsic morality, saying that people ought to be egoists, right? So I don't think you can
Um,
make an ethical
well,
case for egoism.
so when you're saying that you're an Ayn Rand rational egoist, you don't think this is an ethics.
It depends on how you're using the word ethics. Are you, because it really does come down to practical versus intrinsic.
So, this is related to a topic in objectivism, where Ayn Rand, instead of having the subjective objective dichotomy, um, she gives a trichotomy, which is subjective, objective, intrinsic, where for Ayn Rand, objective means some connection between your mind and existence, reality, right? Whereas intrinsic is out there only, and subjective is in here only. Um, she in ethics, these would be the subjectivists would be the whim worshippers, and the intrinsicists would be some sort of duty ethics or something similar.
And the objectivists would be egoists.
Yes,
Okay. Okay. But
and
we can't
specifically,
make
they would
it.
be rational egoists. They wouldn't be like Nietzsche.
Yeah, exactly. We'd be rational egoists, meaning low time preference. So we agree on that.
Whoa,
W-
I'm not sure rational egoism means low time preference.
no, but if you're intelligent, you're low time preference.
I mean, low and high time preference are relative terms, right? Like
What do
low
you mean
time
by
preference compared
relative?
to what is the question.
Meaning
So
long
I
term.
can't just say in a vacuum. Well, I can't just say in a vacuum like John is low time preference, like lower time preference than he used to be, than he will be in the future. Like, you know,
Yeah, I just mean invests in his future.
sure, I think that is for the most part a virtue, but that isn't the essential when it comes to rational egoism.
Okay. But so, for example, and so the way I use the NAP is that it's the best practical use of law, right? So I'm an egoist first, and this means that I do act in my self interest. And my self interest requires that I'm free and the people around me are free. And next, we get into law, which is the implementation of enacting the best things for myself. And this would be the NAP. The NAP would be the foundation for the law because it informs my rational self interest. It's best for me. And so I see it as a good
Mhm.
practical use case. I don't see it as a should, though, an ought.
Right. So do you think there are no oughts? There are. It's never legitimate to say uh, you should do this or that or the other thing.
I think that I'm not convinced that normative oughts exist, right? I know that oughts exist as in I like to be healthy, so I'm going to go to the gym this year. That's an ought, but like normative oughts, that's a different case together because you would sort of have to be presupposing that morality exists and you have to know what morality is.
Right, but I mean, so Ayn Rand is giving an ethics here, right? She's saying that you should live for your own self-interest, that you should be productive, that you should be judicious, all these different things, right? So
Yeah,
like
but
I'm
so
not
how's she
if
grounding
you're
that?
not giving an ethics here, is the claim you're making then just that you feel like doing things for yourself? Like if so, then what is the rational part of this egoism doing? Like what makes it rational egoism as against just egoism?
Yeah, but
I'm not even
isn't that
sure
the
what
point?
this would. I'm not even sure how this would classify as egoism, even because you're not even claiming that this is an ethics.
Right. So I mean, yeah, so like egoism is the idea that and this is I guess this hints at the deeper point I'm getting towards, which is um egoism is serving your self-interests. But how is that ethical, right? How is that like we know that people do certain things, and this is why I'm skeptical of morality because I like what is, meaning we know that people are egoists. We know that people want to serve their self-interests, but we can't necessarily make that bridge between the is and the ought, which is people do like
Well,
to
why
live,
can't we make the
but
bridge
why?
between is and not?
Because there's no evidence for it.
Well, I'm confused by what you mean. So you just think that there isn't any evidence that you can go from is to ought.
Yeah. So because you would need to know what ought means, and like I don't think that any of us even know what that means.
But I mean, I think everybody knows what ought means. If I say you should do this, that, or the other thing, I think there's very few people on planet Earth who would not understand what I'm saying by that. Um, and this strikes me as a sort of uh, your claim almost strikes me as a little bit arbitrary. Like, what is the evidence that there is some special thing going on from is to ought that you can't get from is to ought, but you can get from is to is? Like, is that not a special claim?
So
Like if I said, "Oh no, if I came up with Liquid Zulu's guillotine here," and I said, "Well, you can't get from any facts about physics to facts about what the weather will be, right? Because I just haven't seen the evidence for it, and you've got to show me the entire uh, chain of like reasoning which gets you from facts about physics into facts about what the weather's going to be. Like, give me an entire meteorology course now, like." That I'm making the arbitrary claim there. And I think you're making the arbitrary claim here by saying, well, there just isn't any evidence that we can go from is to ought. And I also believe that I did already provide a way to get from is to ought.
so if that's true, then you can answer this question. And also, if that's true, I'm not sure if you have any like logical syllogisms that would prove that you can get from what is logical to what you should do. But here's my question for you. Why should I live?
I don't like the alternative you've given me there of what is logical or what you should do. Like I think it is logical, rational to do what you should do. That's why we say that's what you should do.
Okay. But yeah, so like how would you apply this to my question, why should I live?
Well, so let's take the alternative here, which is, oh, let's just all die when there's no point to it at all. Um, that is taking a sort of it might be a subjectivist, but I'll stick with the intrinsicist case here for now. Maybe the reason why we should all die is because God said we should all die. I think this is a stolen concept, right? It's treating value as just being some primary, some floating thing. You just got to obey it because it's the law, right? You just got to obey it because that's what the ought says. I don't think that this is true. I don't think oughts are some command coming from out there. Um, I think that you should do these things, um, and but not because they're just commands, right? So why you should live? Well, why should you die, right? they already described it earlier, that the standard of value is life. So how, if life is the standard of value, how could you possibly get to death ethics that you should pursue death? Like I don't see how that could ever
So what if it's the
come
case
about,
that my
right?
life is just so painful that I choose to not exist? Wouldn't that make sense if I would choose not exist? If my life was just more painful than it was pleasurable?
Depends on what you mean by would it make sense. I mean, I could understand why someone would do that. I mean, I'm not an idiot, right? I understand the reasons why somebody might want to, commit suicide or something. But is it rational of them to do this? No,
Why isn't it rational?
because
Are you
life's
saying
the
life is
standard of value.
inherently valuable?
I'm saying it's the standard by which you choose values, or at least the proper standard by which you should choose values.
So I mean, it's true that while you're alive, you do have values, and you will choose the thing that you value. But I guess what is it that we value? At the end of the day, doesn't it come down to like pleasure?
Not inherently, because the pleasure pain mechanism, that's just on the perceptual level, but I don't think that's all you can get. There's such a thing as conceptual level. Like I often pursue things which in the moment I might not be orgasming over them or something. I take cold showers in the morning because I think it's better for me. Um, like it, you know, so
Yeah, I do know.
if the claim then is a psychological claim that people are necessarily going to just be hedonists, well, clearly not, because there are people who aren't hedonists.
Okay. So what if I broaden my definition of pleasure to involve all forms of pleasure, including satisfaction in life and the feelings of pleasure from gaining wisdom and having a family, and being 80 and looking back at your life and being satisfied. If I broaden that to pleasure, um, would there be anything else other than to live for pleasure?
So that sounds like it would be in objectivist literature the concept of joy. Um, so joy would cover all those sorts of things. That's on the emotional level. Um, now you can have contradictory joys is the thing. Um, you could want something which is actively detrimental to yourself and is going to just blow up in your face because you're just ignoring reality, right? So what Rand says is proper is non-contradictory joy, which she calls happiness.
So she prefers happiness over
I
joy.
mean, happiness is definitely a good goal to have to be happy. Like that I'm not denying that one bit. But I don't think it is the primary here.
Wait, that's interesting. I've always heard that joy was like long term and happiness was short term, but you're saying it's inverted?
No, I'm saying they're both on the emotional level. Um, Happiness would be a subset. It's non-contradictory joy, so you could be joyful over, um, some sort of contradictory thing. Because you're ignoring reality. Maybe you get really joyful because you gave a bunch of money away, and but you needed that money.
Okay.
I think that would
But
be a state of contradictory joy.
sure, sure. So, okay, but at the end of the day, objectivists were physicalists, were materialists, right? Ayn Rand rejects
Whoa.
the religion, the metaphysical in some senses, right?
That 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 doesn't mean that we're materialists. So materialism is the claim that there is only matter in motion, that there is no faculty of consciousness. This is another um, false alternative that Rand identifies: the idealist materialist false alternative.
Do you
Um,
think consciousness is
be
metaphysical?
um, well depend like I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, because you said it's not physical, so it has to be something else, right?
Okay. Well, there it has a basis in physical reality, but that doesn't mean that everything is just matter in motion.
Well, like for example, what's
Like there
not?
there is a faculty of consciousness. Well, for instance, a concept that isn't a physical thing.
It
It'll have some
isn't.
correspondent in, like like neurons in your brain or whatever. But like the concept dog, that's not like I can't go out and find the concept dog. Like there isn't going to be a cluster of atoms which is, oh yes, that is the concept God or dog rather.
You sound like a nominalist. Is that a nominalist position?
No. So the nominalist, they accept that there is such a thing as consciousness, um, but they deny the conceptual faculty particularly. I do not deny the conceptual faculty.
Okay, so would you disagree with Aristotle realism being the idea that everything is like within the physical universe? So, like, first of all, universals are in the universe, but the way I see this is that mathematics are physically represented in the universe. I would say that the laws of logic are physically represented in the universe. I wouldn't say that there's any metaphysical nature around them, about them. It just means that they are part of everything in the universe because everything operates on them.
Right, so I reject Aristotle's position that the concepts are like out there. I don't think they're out there in the objects. I think that it's your mind which performs a process of abstraction and creates these mental entities. Right, they aren't physical entities out there.
But mental isn't mental physical.
I mean, it'll be you could describe it physically, but you're not getting the full picture there. Like you could say these neurons were doing this, that, and the other thing. Um, but you could also say this guy was thinking about this stuff.
But that is exactly what I mean. Like at the end of the day, aren't these mental metaphysical concepts we're referring to? Aren't they really just neurochemical?
They'll probably have some sort of neurochemical basis. I mean, I'm not a neurologist or anything, but yeah, I imagine there are some chemicals up there which is the physical basis for your consciousness.
Okay, yeah, but so like that's my point. That's what the hell were we talking about? We started talking about physicalism, and I think I was going somewhere, but I totally forgot what my point was. You don't have your spreadsheet out, do you?
I do, but I wasn't following where you were going.
Oh, it's okay. It's cool. It's cool.
Um,
But at the end of the day, I was just questioning the point of just because we have values, it doesn't mean that we ought to pursue our values. Do you see what I'm saying? We do have values, that's true, but why should we pursue our values?
sure, that you value something doesn't imply that you should pursue it.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't making that claim.
But I'm asking you the question.
Like I think people pursue all sorts of bad things.
But this gets at the heart of morality because morality is a normative ought claim where it's like we are trying to get to something and I want to understand what that thing is and I don't know what it is.
I mean, what is insufficient about the explanation I gave you earlier? That is, living things which need to pursue certain materials and whatnot in order to stay alive, and that is the basis for value. And then on when we get into the volitional beings, that's when we have actual ethics to guide man on how he should think. Guide man on what choices he should make.
But so for example, like don't people live because they value to live?
Yep.
And also on the other hand, people die because they value to die.
Yep. If I think that. they would have a bunch of false premises going on there, but sure, they would
Sure.
consider it a value to die.
But at the end of the day, when we're talking about these things, we're still in the realm of is. We haven't gotten to ought yet. Because ought would infer that we ought
Right,
to
and
chase our values.
I think it's an arbitrary claim to say, well, and we of course we can't go from is to ought. Like I think that's an arbitrary claim, and you need to evidence that claim, or else I'm just going to drop it from the flow, right?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. So I think your claim that we can't get from is to ought, I think that's an arbitrary claim. In the same way that my hypothetical claim, that you can't get from the laws of physics into what the weather will be tomorrow, um, that would also be an arbitrary claim. I would have to evidence that somehow. And
Okay.
you have to evidence somehow that you can't get from is to ought. Now, one way you might try and do that is Hume's guillotine, that I displayed earlier, that Hume's guillotine fails as an attack. So the claim is left as being arbitrary. So it can't be considered.
Would you mind sending me like after this debate like um I don't know like an article or like a syllogism or some reasoning that you believe you've crossed is ought gaps that I can understand that better?
Sure, I mean, you could read Virtue Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Or if you want my argument for the NEP in particular, I could give you that as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing that. Just because I tend to learn things better a lot when I'm just like reading them on my own rather than like talking about it. But yeah, I would appreciate that. I still don't understand how you can get from is to ought. And I'm probably not going to get that for this conversation. So we can just drop that topic and I will read whatever you send to me later.
Sure.
Dope. Okay, so we agree that
So did you have
egoism.
other topics then?
I do have other topics,
Oh,
yes.
sorry. You go ahead.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. So we agree that egoism. Do you believe that egoism is a logical axiom? Because I think I created a logical axiom for egoism.
No, I would not consider it an axiom. I reserve axiom for some very, very specific things. It's right up into the right down into the metaphysics, I should say. So, as far as I see it, there are three axioms, and two of them are actually pointing at the same fact. Um, that shows you how selective I am with this. The three axioms are existence exists, the law of identity, and the axiom of consciousness. So, one way you could state this is there is something of which I am aware. That gives you those three axioms. Because there is something that tells you existence exists. There is something that tells you the law of identity, and that gives you existence as identity there. Of which I am aware gives you that you're conscious, right? So those are the only
Yeah,
three axioms.
this is the only three axioms.
I
Okay,
wouldn't
interesting.
consider you should act in your own self interest. I think that's way way up there into the ethics.
Well, I didn't claim that
Just
you
in the
should
same way
act in.
I don't, and that's why I don't consider that's some people call it the non-aggression axiom. I don't think it's an axiom. I call it the non-aggression principle.
Well, yeah, it's obviously not an axiom. But yeah, so okay, let me read this to you, and then you can tell me what you think about this. But basically, I created this. I guess you could maybe not a logical axiom, but you could call it a axiom or a like I don't know, praxeological axiom or something. Um, the self does what the self wants. So the idea is this statement is axiomatic and logically undeniable within how we understand human behavior. The statement is tautological because it essentially defines action as being driven by what the self wants. By definition, an action is taken by an individual. An action is taken by an individual is something they choose to do based on their desires or preferences. It's basically true definitionally. And I've heard you argue this before, that you cannot act against your preferences. You would agree with that at least, right?
Yeah, and if that's the psychological egoist claim that you do something because you wanted to do that thing, yes, but I don't think that is ethical egoism. I think you can act altruistically. Like what you want might be to destroy yourself, right? And I wouldn't consider that egoist.
You would not consider that egoist?
I would not.
But isn't that what you want to do?
Yep.
So then how would that deny your preferences?
Well, egoism doesn't say follow your preferences.
What
Egoism
does
is
egoism
just
say?
as far as ethics is concerned.
Oh,
Well,
ethical
as far as
egoism.
ethics is concerned. As far as ethics is concerned, egoism just means that you should be the recipient of moral values.
Okay, okay. Interesting. Okay. I have two more corollaries to this that you, I think, will definitely disagree with. The first one is I see that consequentialism is a logical corollary of psychological egoism. And if you want, I can read out that syllogism. But essentially, the idea
Sure.
is that if you start with the axiom, the self does what the self wants. Um, Premise one would be the self does what the self wants. Premise two would be what the self values most are the outcomes or consequences of actions, particularly the outcomes that the self wants. And the premise three would be an action is chosen because its expected outcome aligns with what the self values most. And then the conclusion is that therefore individuals are inherently consequentialists because they act based on the outcomes that they value.
All right. So I think this is again taking a sort of idiosyncratic view of what consequentialism means, because consequentialism isn't an ethical position. You've not introduced any sort of ethic here. You just stated essentially people act for outcomes that they are wanting to act for, which is, yeah,
But don't you think that would inform their ethical position?
it might if they're a whim worshiper.
But like, so like, okay, I understand your point that okay, this is interesting. So yeah, it's true that consequentialism is a meta ethical view. It's a meta ethical view or is it a normative view? I forget. Um,
I was referring to it as an ethical view, which I suppose in your terminology would be normative. It's saying that
yeah.
we should go for the best outcome, whatever best outcome means.
Okay, interesting. I would just say that ethics aside, the a person will do what they want to do. The the means be damned, right? So they will kill 100 people if it satisfies them. They will blow up the world if it satisfies them, because they will always act according to their preferences. So it's true that that's not an ethical position, but it's more of just like a, I don't know, like an additional corollary to the idea that the self does what the self wants.
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure how much ground you want to go over on this psychological egoism position, because I'm not going to disagree with any of it, but it's not going to count as an ethic at all.
Okay. Well, not then we probably agree on that then. But yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay. Okay. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about. I watched your debate with Scott about open borders, and while I will admit I'm not the best debater when it comes to I don't know, like borders and stuff. I do believe that. Well, I'll just say I have a question for you, which is the idea that you guys were talking about. Um, you're for the position that we should have an open borders because the government has land that they do not have a right to, and since they're not going to give it back to the people um, that they're custodians for, we should essentially just make it. I forget the term you used. It might have been like unhomesteaded land or uncollectivized land or something, that we should allow immigrants to basically homestead that land so that someone has the land. But I have a problem with this, and my problem is where does the restitution go, right? So the idea is that if the U.S. owns all the land in the U.S. and the taxpayers have been paying the government, taxes for whatever hundreds of years, and the government just essentially releases this land and lets other people take it, aren't they essentially releasing the restitution, and they're now getting rid of the restitution that they owe the American people?
Well, I disagree with the initial premise there. You said if the government owns all the land and yada yada yada. I disagree that the government owns all the land. Um, but so I suppose the separate claim is well, um, for some public possession that they control, should the state be allowed to prevent people from taking that from them? My position is no, because they don't own it. You can only exclude people from that which you own, because ownership is exclusion.
Okay. So if the government decided to, actually I saw an article on this, I think by Reason or something, where recently the government, like a state government or something, like took some lady's house away and then sold it and kept the profits. If the government takes our land and then they sell it, and then they, what they do whatever they want with the profits, and then you can say they don't own that land, but they're possessing that land. If they possess that land, are they allowed to give it to someone else for free? In which case, that person now owns the land, and the government successfully stole it from you, and also they don't have to pay restitution, right?
Yeah, that has never been my position. My position has always been that if you have a house and the government takes that house from you, you still own that house. You own it the whole time, no matter how many pretensies trades they do with it. Right? You own it the entire time. So if you can demonstrate that you own something, then yeah, go ahead, take it. I have no problem with that. My problem is whether or not the state has a right to exclude people from the entire territory that they claim to own, because I don't think that they own any of it. So they don't have the right to do any of that. So if I want to go into some New Mexico desert, cross the border, I should be allowed to do that, and the government doesn't have a right to stop me.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I was just interested in that because I was wondering where the restitution went, but yeah, that's cool.
I mean,
Um,
most of the restitution's been completely destroyed because the government is a
yeah,
destructive force.
yeah, pretty
Like this
much.
shouldn't surprise anyone.
Well, that was my big problem, because the idea is that I don't disagree with you necessarily that it's better for someone to make use of the land instead of the government possessing it. I think that's far better. But my only problem was if the government takes land away from you or prevents you from using land, and they say they create like a national park or whatever, and they have park services there, and they spend money and resources to, like, build bridges and, I don't know, other structures and facilities. Wouldn't they technically owe that restitution? All those, the property that they built on and the facilities themselves, wouldn't they owe that to the American people?
Well, I don't think the American people can own something. So no, you can't owe anything to the American people
The How about the individuals that
because
make up
the
the
American people
United
is just
States?
well, I mean, each individual would have to show, hey, I actually own this thing and that's this other thing, right?
Well, yeah, but right now we're just talking about a middleman. So, for example, the government taxes people, so they take their money away every year. And the thing is, the government also has no money. They're, what is they currently, like, $35 trillion in debt and like 200 trillion and whatever and whatever. Um, they don't have any money to give the people. So what does a bank do when a person doesn't have money? They start taking away their assets. So in the same way, wouldn't the government have to sell that property and then restitute people with the money that they get from that sale?
I don't think they can sell anything. I don't think you can sell something that you don't own.
Then who does the facility go to?
Well, then it's up for homesteading, right? I think that's the only
But I
option
don't, I don't
left.
understand. So
Either
the
you can,
government,
either you can. Hold on. Either you can demonstrate that some particular individual owns that piece of property, um, or you can't, and it's not owned by anyone in particular. In which case, it's not owned by anybody, so it's free for homesteading.
okay, so basically the government taxes people, so the people give them their money, and then the government makes a park with this money.
Mhm.
Okay, so essentially what you're saying is now that they built this park with this money is now gone. It's evaporated. They no longer owe
No,
restitution to the
that was
people
not my
that they
claim.
stole.
I don't think the money has evaporated. If you could track down where that money went, then you could say, "Hey, that's my money. It was stolen from me and used to pay you, so give it back."
Yeah, we have hundreds of years of tax records.
Yep.
So wouldn't the government then owe the money to the people that they stole from?
Yep.
And if they don't have any money and only assets, wouldn't they have to sell those assets and give that money to the people they stole from?
They don't have any assets because they don't own anything.
So so it looks like the money does evaporate, right? Because after they steal from someone and then they create
No.
a public park and they build facilities, you're saying that they no longer you can't inverse it. Basically, they can't sell that
Well,
facility, take the money back and give it
some
back to the people they stole from.
well, somebody built that public park and received the money, right? The money still exists, so track it down if you can and get it back. I have no problem with that. My problem is with the claim that the government owns this park and that they then can sell it to someone. I don't think the government owns any of these things.
Yeah, I don't want to step on your toes with these terms. All I mean is they're in custodianship or they're possessing it currently. I don't mean they own it. I mean that they're the one who are possessing it. They have control over it.
Yep.
That's all I mean. So essentially, if they did tax people, build a park, you're saying that they couldn't sell that park in order to give the money back to the people they stole from because they have no money. They spent all the money into assets. So you're saying that the assets created just
Well,
um, they
so
become unhomesteaded.
just as a matter of fact, it's not possible for them to sell the park legally, because to sell something you have to own it first. Um, right? So it can't happen. Then what is the root question then? How are we going to pay all these people back? Well, probably not possible to pay all these people back. You could give a good whack. You could certainly pay back a lot of people. Uh, Person in chat gave the suggestion of repossessing, Donald Trump's house, Joe Biden's house, all these different places. Yeah, they could be sold off. Um, that would be fine.
Okay. I mean, I don't like that legal system because it sounds like criminals are able to do something
I
and then
mean,
they don't have to
don't.
pay back the people they
Well, if you
hurt.
don't like it, then it must be false, right? Because you don't like it, so that's clearly a great counter argument.
Well, doesn't that seem to be a flaw in the legal system?
That you don't like it.
No, doesn't it seem to be a flaw that criminals can take money from somebody and then not pay it back?
I mean, the legal system doesn't guarantee that nobody will ever get harmed ever, right? What law is describing is saying, hey, it's bad when criminals take all your stuff and then throw it into a volcano. That's bad when they do that, but that doesn't mean that I have a magic wand where I can suddenly create capital out of thin air and get you completely restituted.
Okay. I mean, it just seems like a flaw in the system because criminals can essentially get away with, they can get away with
What's the
murder. They
flaw?
can take your money and then they can do whatever they want with it and they don't have to pay it back. And then they can just disband and
Right, but
then
law just says that what they're doing there is bad, right? Law isn't a magic spell that you can cast and make all the bad people go away.
Sure, but this is all very mathematical. You can inverse all of this. The
Okay.
money went somewhere.
Go ahead, right? Yeah, if you can if you can figure out where your money went, it's still your money, obviously. So take it back. I have no problem with that.
Okay. I mean, I guess we'll just disagree on this. I just think that, since we have tax records, you know specifically how much was stolen from you. And the idea is that the government spent this money because they don't save money, they don't invest in the economy. They just spend it on things that they want. And then when they spend those things, they don't own them, but they are in control of them. And so I guess if they can't sell them and give back the money, that just seems to be a flaw. But that's probably just something we're going to disagree on. Also, can I?
Well, do you have anything else to go over?
I mean, one more topic. If you're cool with it, if you have time, I don't want to make you stay too late.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So I've heard that you are an accelerationist or a collapsitarian. Is that true?
No, I don't know who claimed this. Um, like what does collapsitarian even consist of?
Oh, okay. Um, I think it's just the idea that uh, speed up the process of destruction of the U.S. government so that we can rebuild as a anarchist society.
Um, I mean, it depends on what specifically you're doing to speed it up.
Okay. I mean, it could. I just probably got a
I
false
think I
impression.
think it's fine to, yeah. I mean, I think it's fine to make like John Galton quit. I think that's fine. But yeah, we would have to go into some specifics.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think the reason I got that idea is because I was watching your and Fabian's debate on open borders, and I think he made a few jokes about like you being collapsitarian, and I guess I just took I think you laughed at it or something, so I thought you were, but I guess that was just a false assumption. Um, but that being said, I can give you my position on it, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree with this. I actually think that collapsitarianism is not a good idea. While it would be cool to, I guess, speed up and destroy the US government, I think that the destruction would outweigh the benefits of it. So, what I think we should do instead, and actually, you might disagree with me on this, being like a pragmatic anarchist rather than, I guess, what you would be called like a principled anarcho capitalist, which is the idea that we should consequentially choose the lesser of two evils in order to maintain as little freedom as we have possible, maintain that amount of freedom as much possible, so that we can create competing technologies that allow us to eventually um, dissociate with the US government. And so I think that there's a few technologies that we've already created and future technologies that we will create in order to create competitions against governments around the world that will allow us to slowly migrate towards those things.
Sure. So I think most of these like plans that people come up with for praxis, they're all entirely non-fundamental. The fundamental here is what philosophy people accept. If people accept a rational philosophy, then you're going to get a rational legal system. If people accept an irrational philosophy, then you're going to get an irrational legal system. And I don't think the level of technology is what the problem is.
Oh, I disagree. Don't you think technology has tremendously shaped how governments and states have interacted with people over the centuries?
I entirely disagree with that. The governments interact with the people, however, they're allowed to, based on what the philosophy of the day is. You could have, massive amounts of technological development bringing us to like this hyper futuristic society, and then Immanuel Kant number two is born, and then Adolf Hitler number two follows him, and then you would have mass genocide across the galaxy or whatever. And that's entirely plausible.
Interesting. Okay. I think we do disagree on this because the way I see it is that technology has forever changed the future of the cycle of history. And eventually we will achieve something like a decentralized anarchist system. And the reason for this is uh, four major technologies that I've identified so far. The first one is the internet, which is the decentralization of information. I think that this is the biggest blow to the idea of statism and authoritarianism forever, um, because we now have the ability to exchange information at high speeds. So now we can keep people more accountable. And this is the base layer of the future of anarchy. And this will forever change the landscape because we will have more accountability. Um,
Hold on,
and
I
then,
just
I
want
mean,
to
yeah,
address
go
that
ahead.
real quick. So you're saying the internet helps you keep people accountable, but then it depends on, well, by which standards are people being held accountable? Are they being held accountable by how charitable they are, how much they're willing to sacrifice? You know, we've heard this over and over and over again. You know, right now, people are one of the main criticisms people have of Mr. Beast right now is that he's not charitable enough. He should have been more charitable, and he should have been more you know, genuine in his charity. He should have done it not because it would help him, but because it wouldn't help him. So I don't think necessarily keeping people accountable means anarchism at all. It depends on which standards people accept, and that depends on their philosophy, which, you know, this goes back to the philosophical theory of history.
Yeah, but so like if we look at YouTube, which I think is the uh, is not entirely free, but it is one of the greatest examples of like a technology of decentralized creators that are all in this gigantic chain, keeping each other accountable. Where you've got hundreds of drama channels, you've got hundreds of politics channels, hundreds of economic channels, and they're all like fighting each other. And this is exactly what the free market does. It puts everybody in competition, and I won't disagree that there's going to be a lot of dis and misinformation, but there's also going to be a lot of true information. And I think that with competition in YouTube and across the internet, as the technology gets better, people will get smarter. As people are getting more educated, they will defer more to logic, and then they will see the need for logical cases and arguments to be made. And this is why when we have drama channels that are reporting all these news, they bring up evidence and facts to prove their cases. And what we notice is that these drama YouTube channels and economic YouTube channels and whatever, they seem to rise very high, and they get lots of base of people who are now learning that you need evidence and good argumentation to support the truth. And I think that eventually, if this keeps going, if competition continues, we will get to higher levels of accountability.
So, these things like the internet and, you know, faster, easier ways to communicate, um, I would be willing to accept that that might speed up the adoption of some alternative philosophy into the mainstream. But that philosophy isn't per se correct. One example is Karl Marx was one of the earliest users of the printing press to spread his philosophy. His philosophy was definitely not correct. It took over like wildfire, spread massively thanks to Immanuel Kant paving the way for him, and Hegel after Kant. Um, but this is still the philosophical theory of history. The philosophy is still the fundamental driver of which standard people are using to hold people accountable.
Yeah. But as more people get access to the internet and as the internet evolves, don't you think that these ideas are becoming more widespread? The idea of objectivism, not just like random ideas, like all ideas. Like people are seeing all ideas because there's so much travel of information. And this is how I found out about objectivism. This is how I found out about libertarianism. Dude, I never knew libertarianism existed until like 5 years ago. Like I never knew it before because we had like big channels like Fox News, CNN. Those are like the only news medias I knew about when I was younger. But as I like dove more into YouTube and like started seeing more people talk about it, you find that all these ideas are converging over people. And as the free market does, the best ideas usually win out. Now, there's going to be lots of misinformation in combat, but I think that people are becoming smarter and technology is growing more powerful, and we're recognizing that rationality is necessary. And this is what we do in like debates and stuff. We're understanding better the importance of proper argumentation. Don't you agree with that?
No. So certainly, the invention of the internet has spread up the adoption of things like objectivism, but it's also sped up the adoption of far more sinister ideas. Like, for instance, Ted Kaczynski's philosophy. I don't think it went anywhere until it was brought up on the internet, and then suddenly people are going around as Kaczynskiites, and all sorts of environmentalists now are able to spread their message widely on the internet and convince everyone to hate humans, right? It's not necessarily the case that having a speed up in the spread of information implies that the information will be correct. It could be falsehoods that are being spread.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but okay, this is interesting. So, would you compare the online environment to be similar to a free market economy if it's like uncensored?
I mean, in certain places, in certain ways, that would be similar. There definitely is a lot of market interactions that go on in the internet.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming that you believe that in free markets, competition is what drives efficiency, productivity, and good ideas. So, why would this be any different for online?
Well, because communicating, being able to communicate faster, does not imply that the correct ideas will take hold. This has been the case for all of history.
Okay. Interesting. What about Bitcoin? You can't possibly say there's anything wrong with Bitcoin.
I don't think there's anything wrong with Bitcoin.
Well, there you go. That's one technology that's literally going to make the Earth, the entire Earth, infinitely better. Not infinitely, but like a lot better,
Sure,
right?
if it's adopted as money, then that would be a lot better than the current situation.
It will be adopted by as money because when investors see things that make
Not
profit,
necessarily.
absolutely, it's been rising for years. It's the greatest performing
Well,
asset
like
of all time.
let's say tomorrow morning, every single UN country banned any sort of use of Bitcoin, right? Do you think that your grandmother is going to want to be using Bitcoins?
No, but it would make Bitcoin more valuable.
Okay, but it wouldn't make it money. Like that would basically kill any chance of it becoming money. Because for it to be money, it would require universal adoption as a medium of exchange, which it's not going to get if you've got to hide that you're using it.
That's true, but the genius of Bitcoin, and we don't have to linger on this for long, but the genius of Bitcoin is that it's such a passive and undangerous concept that if the governments around the world do try to ban it, everyone is going to see this. This is going to be like the biggest story in history if there's like a united government that does this, and all the people will start wondering why this is the case, and we'll start to see that Bitcoin will just become extremely popular because every single government in the world is trying to ban it. And this will probably result in some sort of revolution, but it seems insane and likely impossible that, all the governments in the world would collaborate to ban Bitcoin. And even if they did, it would probably result in some sort of revolution.
So I think you've got a far too high opinion of people. So I can see right now I could give you a path towards which they could ban Bitcoin and have just about everybody right there along going, yeah, ban this Bitcoin thing. So what they could do is they could say, well, people who like Bitcoin, they're selfish, right? And you don't want to be selfish. They're so selfish. They're destroying the environment just so that they can have the more monies, right? And that's so selfish of them. And they're destroying the environment about this. Instead, you should use our central bank currency, which is, by the way, it's carbon neutral, our one. So you've got to use our one, and you don't want to be a selfish person who's destroying the environment. That would be very easy, and most people would be on board with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that sort of happening. I'd like to think that, and maybe I am optimistic, maybe I am overly optimistic, but I'd like to think that many people understand history. Many people have like neo modern values of like the idea that some amount of freedom is important, and I think people will start to get skeptical and suspicious of this. Now they will turn. I think they will turn the leftists, lots of the leftists, against us. But I'm highly skeptical that conservatives and libertarians would all like go along with this idea of Bitcoin being bad.
Oh, if Donald Trump said that Bitcoin was bad, then I imagine a great deal of the conservatives would follow along with him. They've already made plenty of copes about how it was actually okay for him to increase gun regulations, how it was okay for him to lock down the whole country, and how it was okay for him to do this, that, and the other thing, right? Like, the conservatives are no more anarchist than the leftists are.
They're a little more anarchist, right? Just a little bit.
I don't see it.
Come on. Like we can agree that they're very authoritarian, but like they don't know why they believe in freedom. But you have to say that the majority of conservatives like the idea of freedom, even if they don't follow through with it. They at least like the idea.
I think they like it as a bumper sticker, and nothing beyond that. I don't think they've done. I don't think they've done any level of consideration about what that term actually means. They think, well, I like freedom, but we can't have these drug addicts going around. I like freedom, but I mean we got to leave some room for the government. We got to have a social safety net in here. This is not at all an uncommon position amongst these people.
Yeah. Now I was talking with someone the other day about how it's funny that conservatives their true identity is libertarian, but they just don't realize it because they say that they value all the things that they value are really just libertarian values. They value freedom, they value the family, they value independence. All of these things are libertarian values. They're just unrealized libertarians. I think that's what conservatives are. But then they go and they start banning and
Again, I
taxing
think
and
you
all that
have
stuff.
way yeah, I think you have way too high of an opinion of conservatives.
Huh. Must be the people I hang around. Interesting. Okay, but what about free private cities?
What about them?
Don't you think that's going to be a huge deal? They're in construction of creating free private cities, which are going to start competing with governments.
Sure, if you could get a free private city up, then that would be a good thing. But
That's the
again, this is
direction
not a
we're headed in.
fundamental. If Right, but if the philosophy becomes more totalitarian, which that's the direction the philosophy is going in, then it's not very hard to imagine a government going, well, these selfish people in this big city, we'll call it Mulligan's Valley, right? These selfish people, they want to have all this wealth for themselves, and but we've got a war with China brewing, and we got to prepare for this war with China that's brewing. And they're also destroying the environment in there, and they're so selfish. And we got to stop this selfishness that they've got. So we're gonna invade them and stop all this. And by the way, they're all drug dealers in there, and there's all these horrible things going on in there. I cannot. I don't find that hard to imagine one bit.
Damn. Okay, interesting. I mean, maybe it is optimistic. I don't think it is because I know a lot of people are bad, but I think generally the vast majority of people just want to live a simple, peaceful life. I don't think the vast majority of people are bad. I think the vast majority of people just want to live a simple, easy life, and then they'll get angry in politics, but they won't actually act out their vitriolic feelings on it. Um, I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think the vast majority of people, if the government tells them that there's some evil, selfish person who they've got to report on. They'll report on it in a second. So the conservatives, if they say, oh, there's a drug dealer, they'll report on that in an instant. If you've got some sort of a leftist of some sorts, or you know, an immigrant, that's the big one for the conservatives. It's like, oh, or even here's another one, right? You see these OnlyFans models online who don't report their taxes, and there'll be a bunch of rightists in the comments like atting the IRS saying, hey, this person hasn't reported on their taxes yet. Most people, the vast majority of people, will march right along, goose step right along with the government, and kill you if that's what, if they've deemed you to be one of those undeserving people.
Okay. I mean, this is interesting. Like, I don't know if you've heard any of Jordan Peterson's talks, but one of his most famous talks is this idea that don't be too sure that you wouldn't be part of the regime, you know, in Nazi Germany. And it's this idea that people really do go with the flow. People are they're what they're simple animals that they just sort of listen to the directions. And if it's going to be dangerous or it's going to harm them, they're just going to go with everyone else. But doesn't it seem like there's been a shift like in the last few decades where people
Yeah.
are getting smarter? Like sure, there's some people who
Well,
are
like
just simple-minded.
it's like I remember long time ago, you know, back in the old days of 2020, when just about every government on earth said, you know what, nobody's allowed to go outside anymore. You're all arrested inside of your homes. And these ordinary, everyday people, they were reporting on their neighbors, saying, hey, my neighbors, they had a gathering of more than three people. You got to get in there and arrest them, right? Or this gym down the road, they didn't close for business, so you got to get in there and arrest them. Like these were ordinary, everyday people, not that long ago, who were reporting on their neighbors because the government said so.
Yeah. And also, if you think about how the conservatives also deny that Trump was the initiator of the lockdowns, I guess that does make it a little bit worse.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's not on the same level as like the Soviet Union, right? That's not on the same level. Like obviously that's bad, but like people would have made a hard break if they started doing worse things than that. Don't you think?
I mean, we're not that far off from the Soviet Union. All the philosophy is already there, ripe for it. Um, it's the philosophy has to be changed, um, and that's why I do what I do. So I'm trying to change the philosophy because that is the fundamental.
Okay, but don't you have hope for the future? I mean, the way I see it is that like I never
Yeah,
learned about
absolutely.
libertarianism until the rise of like YouTube and stuff. So I the way I see this is that good ideas are going to become more popular, very incrementally, albeit, but very slowly they will start to get more popular. I never knew what libertarian was, like I said before YouTube, but like as we keep going, as media and information becomes more decentralized, more people are going to hear good ideas. And at some point, we'll be able to create like some colony or something. What is it? The what state is it? The Freedom Project?
New Hampshire Free State Project.
Yeah, we're gonna get more stuff. Like, by the way, are you moving there? I heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice,
I
dude.
mean, like,
But
I
stuff like
don't
that's
want
gonna
it
happen.
to sound like I don't want it to sound like I'm pessimistic. I'm definitely not pessimistic. I think there's definitely a path towards bringing about a more freedom-oriented philosophy. I just think the things that you mention, they are all downstream of changing the philosophy. Changing the philosophy is the fundamental part, um, and that's why we got to bring about anarchist objectivism as being the mainstream philosophy.
I actually 100% agree with you, and that's the reason why I think the libertarian party is kind of a dumb idea because we're never going to win any elections. What I think we should do is take all those resources and money and just spend it on libertarian education. And just like the leftists did, instead of having a political party, I think we should literally just put all our money into creating, libertarian institutions that and libertarian marketing that spread out these ideas, because the Libertarian Party is kind of a failure. So we should just put that all into research, development, and education.
Well, I think being on the presidential ticket is a potential good way to spread the message, though. Like, I mean, Ron Paul did that. He wasn't on the
Yeah, but
presidential
it's
ticket,
like
but
you said, the
he
philosophy
ran,
comes first.
tried to get it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I am hopeful for the future. I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, but I think things definitely will get better. Damn.
Sure. Yeah. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, that was an awesome conversation, man. I mean, yeah, I appreciate like everything you told me. Good conversation. Glad we were able to deal with all those things. By the way, can I get into your server? I don't know how to get into your server.
Sure.
Okay, cool.
I'll do a discussion in there after the debate. I'll post in
Dope.
the
Actually,
no
would you
fucking
mind if I
fly
joined
keeps
in?
flying around me.
I want to hear all these people roast me.
Sure.
But yeah, I want to get into your server. I like you. You're a smart dude. If you're cool with, I want to hang around with more libertarians. I want to understand the philosophy better, and I want to build a community of libertarian like-minded people. So, hopefully you're cool with me. I'm super cool with you. I like the content you make.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I'll see you in the I'll probably just go into the general VC. I'll
Dope.
see you in a
Okay,
bit.
I'll see you in there, man.
My claim there
The evidence.
was that your position that, well, there isn't any evidence that you can go from is to ought. That claim itself is an arbitrary claim. Just as it's an arbitrary claim for me to say, well, there's no evidence that you can go from the laws of physics into predicting what the weather will be tomorrow. Right? I would have to provide some evidence there. You'd have to provide some evidence that you couldn't go from is to ought.
Exactly, which I don't understand at all. And that's why you're gonna
What's
send
your
me a good whatever article or something.
it's your claim though?
The claim is the claim is me asking a question of what is the justification. So, like, is that really a claim?
Are you claiming that you can't go from is to ought?
Um, Again, I would just switch it around. Instead of claiming how do you I wouldn't claim that there is no way to breach the Izot gap. I would ask what is the evidence for bridging the Izot gap. That's how it went.
Right. I think he provided some evidence for it, using his argument on how he derived NAP.
Yeah, which I didn't understand. So he's gonna send me something to read.
Do you understand like the ethical justification, like without like it being moral? Because I think you have like those two things are separate, right?
Well, what do you see the difference as?
Well, I think the difference is more like semantic, or like I'd say moral is more something you'd like use in your personal life, like helping like a kitten or something. That's like moral or something like that, right? And ethical is just like, well, as a Zulu, I guess would say, just true. If you like take all the other things that you could do in the situation, which one is the one that is not like incoherent essentially, or like doesn't create contradictions.
Right, that's true. My problem is just with moral objectivism, which Zulu basically said that there is a way to. I forget what exactly he said, but I think he said that there is a way to breach the Izod gap, which I just don't understand.
What's your
Yes, I think the. Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
what's your evidence that the gap exists in the first place?
It's not a matter of me saying the gap doesn't exist. It's a matter of me not understanding how to cross the gap.
But the gap doesn't exist. So, what is your evidence that there is a such gap in the first place? I'm denying the existence of the gap.
So the evidence would be something like this, and I asked Zulu the same question, but essentially I would say, why ought I live? It's a very simple question, but the answer is not so simple. Now we know that people do have values, and we know that people chase their values, but we don't know why people should chase their values.
Well, it's very simple. The ought comes from the is. They're not separate in the first place. Why ought you live? Because living is the thing that makes values possible. That's how simple it is. There's nothing you can change about that situation. That is the is. And since living makes values possible, it is a value, and then you ought to follow certain moral codes so you can follow the is. And there's nothing you can do to change the is. Is ought follows the is. The dichotomy actually that never existed in the first place. Hume was being wrong.
I don't see that as being self-evident though, as you should live so that you can, I forget what you said, so that you can chase your values. You should live so
Yeah.
that you can chase your values.
Yeah, it's not an axiom, right? I already justified it though. I don't claim that it's an axiom, but living is a value because it's the thing that makes values possible. If not for life, we wouldn't have the concept of values in the first place. Therefore, it's the ultimate standard of value. So,
Right, but he could deny the value of life in particular, and then he could just commit suicide, and that would
Yeah,
be a
doesn't it seem
denial.
kind of circular how
Yeah.
you say that you
No.
live in order to achieve your values and you should live in order to achieve your values? Like,
No, you don't live. I didn't say you live in order to achieve values. I said value presupposes life. Those are two different sentences.
value
You have to-
presupposes life.
Yes. Life makes
And I
value
suppose
possible,
you
and
can't value
there's
death.
nothing you can do to change this fact. That is the is, right? There's nothing you can change the fact that value presupposes life.
So I'll grant you that.
Therefore, you, if you're a rational being, rational humans cannot deny this fact. Reality is independent of your mind. There's nothing you can deny this. So if I'm not going to deny reality, and if the value indeed presupposes life, then I have to look into, okay, life is the ultimate standard of value. So how do I act according to life? According to living, according to flourishment, optimizing living. Now this brings the ought. The is and out come from the same reality. They don't exist in separate realities. Living requires action, and action requires a standard of value. Humans ought to pursue values that sustain and enhance their lives. Therefore, by this way, we can prove that the gap between is and ought never existed in the first place.
Right, but it sounds a
Yep.
little bit like you're presupposing that I ought to value. What if, like, why
Yes,
should I
there
value
is-
value?
There's still a gap in that reasoning.
So you outvalue human life because there's no other reality because of the primacy of existence. You cannot change reality. Your consciousness doesn't change reality. Reality, as I said, exists independent of your mind. And the fact that life being the ultimate value, and without life, the concept of value would be meaningless, this exists independently of your consciousness.
Yes, exactly.
you
I think
can-
what's the best way to understand this is that you can't value death because, again, value presupposes life. So if you value death, you are in a contradiction, right? You're
Yeah.
going to attempt to optimize your life such that you die. That is
basically,
not good.
ought is derived from the objective requirements of human life.
Okay, so you're saying that in order to value, you need to be alive, and so because you are alive, you can't value death.
You can choose to value death, but that will be a wrong choosing. It will be wrong.
Wait. Okay, wait.
It's not to justify it.
What do you mean it'll be a
Yeah.
wrong choosing? Because if we agree that man acts purposefully and that man always acts to his strongest preference, how can it be wrong that him choosing death
That's-
was the thing that he valued?
That's psychological. That's psychological.
can-
It's possible
can-
for people to value something incorrect. But what we're talking about is on a philosophical level, right? When you try to justify this, you can't justify valuing death because in order to value death, you must also value being alive. And this is a contradiction. You can't value both these things at once. It is A and not A. And I think, everyone gets that.
Wait, wouldn't you
Yeah,
say that
so-
value is psychological, not philosophical?
No.
It's
So
conceptual.
there's a confusion in here, which I do understand the confusion. Men do act purposefully. I can also purposefully decide to, I don't know, genocide the Jews or something like that. This doesn't mean my purposeful action is good. So yes, you must take purposeful actions for an end. This is a psychological statement of how humans act like. But there's also a statement of how humans should act like. So my purposeful action should be rational actions because life is the ultimate standard of value because I want to follow the actions that requires a standard of value. So I should probably select better purposeful actions than murdering the Jews or something.
Can I take a swing at the is-ought thing real quick? Would you guys
Go for
mind
it.
that?
Go for
Okay.
it. Hit it with that.
All right. Thank you. So as far as I understand it, the ought and the is-ought is a prescriptive statement, and the is a descriptive statement. So when someone invokes the is-ought dichotomy, it's self-contradictory because when someone asserts that you can't get an ought from an is, they're implicitly making an ought statement themselves because they're saying that you ought not to derive an ought from an is, which is inherently self-contradictory. And I
Not
think
necessarily.
that logical arguments are preferable to illogical arguments. And then the other idea I have about it, and sorry for steamrolling through, I just wanted to get the thought out, but I did hear some pushback. And then the other thing is I think it can be overcome by if-then statements, and this kind of gets past the, in order to value anything, you have to be alive first thing, because then the obvious rebuttal is, well, monks light themselves on fire. So if you want to be healthy, which is a somewhat objective standard health, then you can't be obese. Or if you want to say true things about, reality, then you ought to use the scientific method, or, if then. So what do you guys think of that?
I
So-
disagree with it entirely. I think there's a conflation between the use value of a particular method and an actual prescriptive statement. So
Truth value.
by performing an action, I'm not presupposing that I ought to do that action. That's a conflation between the utility I'm taking from that action and a normative statement regarding the action.
I had my microphone now. I like to speak on this now because I finally have my microphone. I
Go
was going
for
to
it.
speak on it earlier, but I guess in relation to something like a question of, why ought I value? Here's the thing. All you can do is value. The question for man, since man is constantly engaging in purposeful action due to his faculty of reason not being automatic, he engages in constant purposeful or intended behavior. Man simply cannot choose just to not act. The question is not to act or not. The question is how to act. It is the question of ought I do this or ought I do that? Because it's, of course, to try to purposefully not act is a complete contradiction. Man's nature, is about that he has to constantly engage in purposeful, intended behavior. When you are acting, you intended on that behavior. You're presupposing that you should act. So the question here is, how should man act? That is the question that ethics is describing. What are the proper values for man? And this comes from the fact that man has an objective nature. If man's nature were simply arbitrary, then sure, ethics would be arbitrary. But man has an objective methodology of reason. And because of that, man has an objective methodology of reason. We must have you must have a methodology. That's my point. Is if man's reason is objective, then the methodology for reason too is objective. Where is this arbitrary subjectivity coming from? An apple let fall falls from a tree. We observe this to be in the nature of an apple. If we have hydrogen and oxygen, we put them together, it's called water. This is in the nature of hydrogen and oxygen and water. Why cavil at the concept of nature? Man's nature, too, is objective. His reason is objective. The point is, because man's reason is objective, he has objective criteria for his life. Many things he has to have to survive, such as food, clothing, water. The main point is that we must have a methodology for reason. Man is constantly engaging in all of this purposeful behavior because that's all he can do. It's not to act or not, it's to do this or to do that. And because of that, we must have a methodology, a logic to know if we should do this or to do that. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Yes. So I want to briefly respond to Kairos. When you said, I feel like your refutation of the Hube's guillotine is a bit flawed, because what you said was, when they say you cannot get an is from an ought, they're making a prescriptive statement. That's not necessarily true. They could be simply saying that it is not true that you can get an ought from an is, right? That's simply
Right.
that could be
But-
making a descriptive statement.
That is itself an epistemic norm. They're saying you should only believe in these certain things, right? They're not making a moral claim.
That's
there.
not
They
even
still argue that it
necessarily
should.
true.
Yeah,
They're not
that's
even
not-
saying they don't even have to be saying that you should believe in things. They might just be saying this is a true statement. In like they
Right,
might not
but
necessarily
I don't
be
know-
saying that anyone else should believe it.
I don't understand what the distinction between me saying the sky is blue right now and me saying you should believe that the sky is blue right now. Like, what is the actual distinction between those two claims?
Well, the distinction is that the second claim involves like what other people should believe, and the first claim is merely a statement of fact, right? Like there's clearly a difference.
Right, but what does it actually mean to state a fact if not saying, hey, that your cognitive fact, obviously you're not saying this explicitly, but like this is the whole science of epistemology. It's telling you how you should operate your mind in order to attain truth, in order to attain knowledge, right?
Right. Yeah. But like any statement, it could just be it is the case that the sky is blue, and I might believe
Right, and
it's
I
not
don't
necessarily
think
true
that
that
claim
people
is
should
any
believe that.
different. I don't think that the claim that the sky
Sorry,
is blue.
my oven is beeping.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there is any distinction from saying the sky is blue to saying you should believe that the sky is blue, right? Because when I'm saying the sky is blue, I'm relying on a certain epistemology, which all ends up in, hey, the epistemology that I think is correct says that you should believe this thing.
I mean, that
That's
just
not
presupposes the idea
that's not
that
necessarily
like
the case.
that presupposes the norm that
Well,
any
if
statement
that isn't the case, if these are
implies
completely
that you believe
distinct
other people
claims.
should believe it.
Well, if these are completely distinct claims, could I simultaneously say, hey, the sky is blue and you shouldn't believe that the sky is blue? Would you think that that person is making any sense?
It would be a contradiction, but it would be possible for someone to say that and believe
Well,
it.
it's a
Just like
contradiction.
it's
Alright,
possible
okay.
for someone to value
Well,
death.
If that's a contradiction, for me to claim the sky is blue and you shouldn't believe the sky is blue, doesn't that imply that they're the same claim? It would be A and non-A, which implies that they're both A, right?
That is,
they're
that
not
is
they're not
possible,
the
yes.
same claim. One is a descriptive statement about the nature of something, while the other is a statement about the obligations.
What action you should take.
Yes, what action you ought to take. Now, when you say something like
Sure,
the
okay.
sky is blue, or so
But
you're not necessarily presupposing you ought to believe the sky is blue or
Sure,
anything.
sure. But
It's a value-free descriptive statement.
okay, so you pointed to a difference there. They're pointing at different parts of this, right? But what Kronik accepted there is that I can't simultaneously, whilst remaining non-contradictory, point to you shouldn't believe the sky is blue and point to the sky is blue. I can't point to those at the same time without being in contradiction. So therefore,
I might walk that
could
back actually now
you
that I think
point-
about it.
Yeah.
okay. So then why do you walk that back? How could I be consistent in saying the sky is
They're
blue,
two
and you
different
shouldn't
types
believe
of.
that the sky is blue.
They're two
Well,
different types of statements.
So you wouldn't
they're two
consider
different
that
statements.
at
Like,
all inconsistent.
No,
no,
it
it
is
could be.
it's not inconsistent. No.
Yeah, it could
Okay,
be the
so
case
when
that
I
like
claim the sky is
the
blue, am I using some sort of epistemology when I say the sky is blue?
yes,
Can be, yeah,
obviously
but that doesn't
you're claiming something
doesn't
about the
necess-
facts about reality.
yeah, it doesn't necessarily presuppose
and if-
any normative
and-
statement.
But what does epistemology tell man, if not how he should operate his mind in order to obtain knowledge? What does epistemology say, if not any sort of should? If epistemology doesn't give you any norms, what is it actually claiming?
It's
Wait,
Yeah. So there is a
and-
distinction here. There is a distinction here because the sky is blue is a fact. You should believe the sky is blue is an epistemic norm, and those are different things. Like how you come to facts, how you should come to facts is epistemology, but the facts themselves are not epistemology. So like the fact that the sky is blue is
But
not epistemology on its own.
Right. But all I'm trying to establish here, for now, the second step is to show that these can't point in different directions. But for right now, when I'm making the claim, the sky is blue, I am using an epistemology there, right? I think we agreed on that. And what would it mean to have an epistemology which doesn't give you norms, which doesn't say you should believe in true things? Could you have an epistemology that says you should not believe in true things?
Epistemology is what allows you to obtain knowledge. It shows you what's required to have knowledge. It's not telling you if you're obligated to use this epistemology. I think it's simply
I'm not
telling
saying
you.
obligated. Like that's getting up into morality. I'm not making the moral claim here, right? But it is still a norm. It's saying these are the things you should do for knowledge.
Yes, I
Couldn't you
guess,
phrase
yeah.
it as if you want to be accurate, consistent, and valid, then you should use the most accurate and consistent epistemology. So if I want to be accurate in my truth claims, then I shouldn't use I don't know, tea leaf reading or animal entrails. I should use something like the scientific method if
Or like
I want
most
to be
basically,
accurate.
if you
Scientific
want
method
to
relies
believe
on
true things,
epistemology.
then you should believe the sky is blue.
Knowledge is the end. Epistemology is simply the means. There's no normativity necessitated. There's just no. You don't need to presuppose that you ought to go about this.
Okay, so if there is no normativity in epistemology, it can't give you any norms. It can't say this behavior is proper, this behavior is improper. Specifically related to knowledge, it can't say this method is proper, this method is improper. What you have there is not an epistemology.
I don't see why it's not an epistemology.
Because
Well,
epistemology
why
is supposed
would
to tell
you
you the proper
argue that-
methods to gain knowledge.
Yeah, it shows you the conditions. It shows you what was required for you to obtain knowledge. Yes, but it's not giving you any prescriptive statements about how you ought to go about. What
does it mean to describe the conditions required to obtain knowledge without also saying what the proper method for gaining knowledge is?
You could say proper method. Yeah, you could say this is these are the rules. Okay, you should go about, but you're saying you should in a different sense.
Rules, right?
You're not using it in a
I
normative.
agree that it's not a moral ought. I agree it's nothing to do with ethics yet, but it is still an ought claim. Right? And I think it's arbitrary of Hume to say, well, okay, epistemic oughts are fine, just not moral oughts.
Well, it's two different senses of the word ought. It's not. What your claim epistemic norms. They're not. As you said, they're not in the realm of ethics. They don't tell us anything about ethics.
Well, okay, I think I see what Zulu's trying to say here, where he's saying.
Well, I wasn't claiming that it's ethics, right? To be clear, I'm definitely claiming that these are epistemic norms. I agree with that, right? That this isn't giving you an ethic yet, but it is still an ought claim. right? Hume's argument is supposed to give us an argument against any sort of ought claim, right? How does he particularize to just moral oughts whilst allowing epistemic oughts?
Isn't it just the normative? Isn't just the
Different sense of the
normative
word.
ought that he's claiming against? Isn't that all that is?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So like, isn't Hume just arguing against the normative ought? Like, obviously, he wouldn't be against. If you want to run 100 meters the fastest, you
his
need to
argument
train.
applies. If
That's
we
an epistemic
would
ought.
take,
I think we're confused. Like an epistemic ought has some similar character to a moral ought that makes them both oughts, right? And so I'm actually curious if this is even like if this is a dichotomy here. Like what is actually supposed to be the distinction between an epistemic ought and a moral ought?
So like, wouldn't it be?
I suppose I could jump in with that. So hold
Go,
on,
Zulu.
hold on. I think the only distinction I can see between those two things, is what the end goal is in divinity's terms here, right? Is the goal to live the good life or to get knowledge? But living the good life requires knowledge, of course.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're like difference of kind here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the point though. That's the thing, is that Hume's attack is an attack on normativity. It's not an attack on moral norms. And so Zulu's right. It is inconsistent to accept epistemic norms, but the argument be against like norms as such. It's like drawing a distinction between like food norms and sleep norms, right? It's like, obviously in one case the goal might be sleeping, in one case the goal might be getting food, but there's still norms, and that's what the similarity is. So you can't like attack moral norms without also attacking in some way epistemic norms, if you're attacking them on the grounds that they're norms and not on the grounds of what the goal is.
Interesting. By the way, Divinity, are you the Divinity, like the YouTuber?
YouTuber? I've never been referred to as a YouTuber. I have a YouTube, but I don't know. You're probably not talking about me.
Wait, have you debated synth before?
Yeah, never mind. That's me.
Okay, dude, I want to talk with you sometime. I've seen your debates. They're cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, if you click his profile, he has his YouTube link there, so you can stalk him on the internet.
That's right. But yeah, as it pertains to the is epistemology normative? So there is a way in which you can say it can be non-normative, but you would just have a radically different approach than what what like objectivists do. Like you could say, for example, that descriptively certain conditions have to obtain for you to have knowledge or for you to be justified. But you could, not say that you should do anything, just that if you have that goal, you should. But I mean, the whole given the goal thing, that is a norm. So that like it doesn't make sense really to say it's non-normative, because epistemology.
I'm interested in hearing your answer to this question. Why ought I live?
Oh yeah, beautiful. When you ask why there, let's conceptually reduce evaluative concepts. Like, what is by why there? At least from what I understand, you're asking for like a motivation, right? It seems like that. Okay.
Yeah, looking for motivation.
I mean, exactly. And so, evaluative language, like why, reduces down to motivation. And so the reasons for why you should live is to be happy. Or I won't say happy because that's loaded, but to have positive emotional experiences. It's the reason you should live. And now if you ask,
attain values.
But how do you know that?
Why should I? Well, well, how do I know that you should live to be happy or something like that?
Yeah.
Well, it's because the concept of like evaluative concepts refer to those things. Like if you're essentially asking like, well, why should I pursue positive motives? It's like, the concept of why presupposes positive motive. When you ask why, you're asking for a positive motive.
Right.
Unless you're not doing that,
It's
which
sort
I
of
don't know what you're doing.
circular. It's
Well,
like,
it's not
why should
circular.
I
Like,
pursue my preferences, right?
well, I don't accept that you should pursue your preferences per se, because your preferences could lead to negative emotional experiences.
So then, aren't you presupposing that you are pursuing pleasure, like you ought to pursue pleasure on a broad scale, meaning satisfaction, wisdom,
Well,
good
I
life?
don't want to. Yeah. So let's clarify that the fundamental concept evaluatively are positive emotional experiences. Now, you have more complex emotional mechanisms that rely on your free will and the way you live your life, and so desires and wants and goal, like higher level goals, like those things are all they can be good for you, but they have to be made consistent with the fundamental. So, I mean, I'm not. Sorry, your question was I presupposing something?
Yeah. So when I asked the question, "Why should I live?" it seems like you said you should live to live a good life, but I guess that kind of just backs up the question to why should you live a good life?
Well, when you say why there, like, what are you like that question doesn't really make sense. Like,
Exactly.
well, it doesn't make
That's you nailed it. Okay, you nailed it. That's exactly what I'm asking, because the question why is such a hard question to answer, because we don't even necessarily, like, we can't even possibly comprehend what we're asking when we ask the question
Well,
why.
it's not. Oh, no. That's not why I'm saying it's confused. I'm not saying it's because the question doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand what it means. I'm saying that the reason you're asking the questions don't exist. The question's very meaningful. Like, when you say, why should you live? Well, you're asking for a motivation to live. So you should live for positive emotional experiences. That's what motivations are. Now, if you're asking, why should I live for positive motivational experiences? That doesn't make sense, because the concept of asking for a reason is asking for a positive emotional experience. It's like asking, if you want a positive emotional experience, why should you pursue emotional experiences? It's like, what? It's like, it's because it's emotional experience.
But isn't that pleasure?
Yeah, it is pleasure. Well, pleasure is a type of it. I just like to say positive emotional experiences, because sometimes you can use pleasure to specifically refer to like physical positive experiences as opposed to like, grand conceptual ones.
Yeah, well, I like
think
to be edgy and talk
happiness
like a
was the
utilitarian.
term I used in the debate. So like happiness is in non-contradictory joy.
Yeah, that's a type of positive experience, but it's not like pleasure per se.
But so I guess, do you understand where I'm getting at? Where it almost falls into a type of infinite regress, where when you ask for why should I live for pleasure, it seems like the answer is you should live for pleasure. Well, you'll go back to, I don't know, whatever your answer was, but it seems to go back infinitely. The thing with is there's a hard stop with
Well, here's
logic.
the problem.
There's a hard stop, but there's not that with ought.
The problem is that you're trying to divorce the question from your epistemic standpoint. Okay. So the meanings of the question, like the meaning of the question, why should I X, Y, Z? Those meanings have reducible origins, right? The concept of why and should and reason, all of those evaluative concepts originate in your experiencing of pleasure and pain. And so it isn't infinitely regressive. It's just the fact that whenever you ask why live for positive emotional experiences, it's like a category error to ask for that. The concept of why presupposes, positive emotional experiences, not the other way around.
If I can jump in, it might be easier to answer it with like a negative statement, like it's because you haven't like killed yourself essentially. Because, well, yeah, that's it essentially.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to say whether or not. So there's like, you're concerned right now with like the theory. You're not necessarily concerned with like, do people choose to live good lives? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, whenever you ask for like a reason, you're asking for a motivation, and a motivation, all there is, like motivations are positive emotional experiences. Take for instance the the indestructible robot example, right? Take that example, but then assume that there's no emotions, right? Why should the robot do anything? It shouldn't. Like, there's no motivation for it to do anything. Now, if you introduce hedonic aspects of its experience, like pleasure and pain. But there are reasons to do things. And so, I mean, that's not infinitely regressive, right? It reduces in the fact of you experiencing, positive experiences.
Okay,
I'm
but
actually,
I
if you're
think
interested, by the way, if you're interested, I'm talking to, there's this objectivist. His name is Dr. Dan Norton, and I'm talking with him tomorrow on this topic. If you want to watch that video.
yeah, I'll do
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Sounds dope.
I'll be watching that one. I've seen some of Dan's videos. He seems more reasonable than the Randroids.
Yeah, probably.
Divinity, can I ask you something?
What's up?
Okay, so you said that the goal of life is to have positive human experiences, correct?
Of a human life, yeah.
Yeah, positive human life. So, I jumped in here late. I don't really fully know the context of this, but like, let's say I derive really positive experiences from like beating the crap out of people. Like, I absolutely have gained total positive experience from just killing people. Why should I not live that out?
Yeah, so part of understanding positive experiences as a motivation is understanding the continued pursuit of positive experiences. And so whenever you're constructing a standard for what to pursue, you have to understand the impacts of your pursuit long range. Because you might experiencing something super pleasurable now, but it might paralyze you from being able to pursue more things in the future. So given that we understand that our action has to be planned long range, trying to pursue positive experiences social second-handedly by violating the rights of people and not relying on producing your own things with reality, that kind of policy isn't sustainable long range. That's why you shouldn't do it.
Okay, so you and I basically have the same view on that then.
Yeah, it's the normal objectivist view.
I'm not the normal objectivist, but okay.
No, I know, but I'm saying that view is the objectivist view.
Well, yeah, I know. I've been around you guys long enough to know that.
Yeah. What was the conversation raised in though? Like the question about epistemology and norms, like kind of.
It was in reference to companions and guilt, because Anarchaeosis was using Hume's guillotine basically as like, well, he clearly can't get from is to ought, and so the attack was that, hey, that attack doesn't work. Hume's guillotine doesn't work, so therefore you're left with an arbitrary claim that there is some sort of gap here from is to ought, and you've got to
Right.
show that you can't get from is to ought.
Right. Oh, okay. But so you ran companions and guilt?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I object to companions and guilt in the way that it's normally presented, but I'd agree with the reformulation. Categorical reasons don't exist, but hypothetical ones do. So I mean, I'd grant that.
When you say categorical reason, what do you mean? I know what a categorical imperative is, but what's a categorical reason?
Yeah. So okay, think about it like this. If I have an instrumental reason or like a hypothetical reason, the reason there is just the motivation for pursuing such and such. So if I have a goal, that goal serves as the reason to do something for the means, right? A categorical reason is essentially like the equivalent of like the categorical imperative distinction from a hypothetical imperative. So it's supposed to be a thing which motivates you to perform an action, but has no instrumental relationship to the thing being performed. The problem with that, obviously, is that that's an anti-concept, right? Like, what does it even mean to, have a reason to do something independent of a goal, or independent of a standard or something? That doesn't make any sense. So I would agree with companions and guilt, but like an objectivist shift on it. So it's like, if there are reasons for belief, not necessarily categorical, but if there are reasons at all.
What is this companions and guilt, by the way?
It's this argument to explain how if you deny, moral norms, you'd also be committed to denying epistemic norms. So the argument goes is this: like, if there are epistemic reasons for belief, then there are moral reasons for action. And the premise one justification is that is that epistemic norms and moral norms are like relevantly similar.
Well, no, epistemic norms are not ought claims.
They are ought claims.
No, what Hume's guillotine is saying is that you cannot derive a prescriptive conclusion from purely descriptive premises.
What do you mean by derive there? Like, do you mean deduce?
Conclude, deduce, yes.
Well, yeah, I'd agree with that. Well, actually, I probably wouldn't agree with that. I mean, so the first thing is I think Hume is begging the question: why would I accept that there's a dichotomy between facts and values?
Because one is value free and the other is not.
That's just presupposing the division. Like, what's the problem in taking facts to be or taking values to be a certain species of fact?
Well, I think the big distinction here is we know that we have motivations, and we know that we have values, and we know that we chase those values, but we don't know why we chase those values. Sorry, we don't know why we should chase those values. Sorry.
But that kind of demand to ask why we should chase values is inverting the conceptual hierarchy. Should evaluative language is after motivation. So to ask why motivate, like to ask, well, why be motivated by motivations? That doesn't make sense. The concept of why presupposes motive.
So if you're saying motivations presuppose ought claims, then I don't disagree with that.
Other way.
Ought claims presuppose motivations.
Like here's like the way that you reduce the fact value dichotomy. When I ask why I should do something, I'm asking for a motivation. I'm asking someone to identify the fact that something is motivated.
Right.
There's not a dichotomy between fact and value. Values are a species of fact. And Peikoff has an essay talking about this. If you're interested.
What's it called?
Fact and value.
Nice.
Yeah. He kind of gibberates in it a little bit, but he has good points in it. But it's essentially what I'm talking about, that evaluative language is just a certain species of fact. And it has to do with the relationship that consciousness has to reality, and specifically volition.
That's definitely interesting.
But yeah, that's the problem with Hume's argument, or when you say, well, there are no epistemic oughts. Like, what do you mean by ought there? Because if by ought you mean like you should believe such and such. Is that what you mean?
When I hear an epistemic ought, what I think of is, in order to win the race, you need to train every single day for months. That's what I hear as an epistemic ought.
The example we used was, is there a distinction between the statement, the sky is blue, and you ought believe the sky is blue?
Yeah, there's a distinction.
There's a strong distinction.
Yeah, one has to deal with the fact of the sky being blue, and one has to deal with the facts the facts about human cognition and what they would have to obtain to believe that.
But then what we got into was, well, could I coherently claim at the same time? Like, so they're pointing at different parts of this, I see.
Right.
But could I point at the same time at, you shouldn't believe that the sky is blue and that the sky is blue? Like, I don't think I can point in these two different directions at once.
Or to frame this logically, you could say that the sky is blue implies you should believe the sky is blue. And if the former is true, then the latter is also going to be true.
Well, let's try to reduce the concepts again. Like, so when it comes to an epistemic ought, I think the problem here is we're treating thought process as if it's not a type of action, right? So like people understand moral norms as like, oh, I'm controlling my actions, such and such. But you do that with your mind too. In the way that you conduct your mind's thought process. And so the question can be asked about the way you think. So, in what way should I think? and then you have to specify the goal, right? And so, I mean, that's what epistemology does. So whenever someone says, it might be true that you believe something, but, and I agree that it doesn't necessarily imply an epistemic ought, but to say that epistemology exists independent of epistemic oughts is wrong.
Interesting.
Right, and then I think that's even enough for me to demonstrate my claim that you can't point in these two different directions, because if I'm making the claim the sky is blue, then I must be relying on some prior epistemology there. Like, I don't think I can separate that from epistemology, and I don't think you can separate epistemology from epistemic norms.
But do you need to value truth in order to say that thing that you're saying? You can't make a distinction between the sky is blue and the sky ought to be blue.
Well, the sky ought not be blue, but
Well,
you
I
ought
agree
to
with
believe
the
the sky is
distinction
blue.
you pointed out, that they're. I agree with the distinction Chronic originally got to, that they're pointing at different parts, but I think those are just different parts of the same thing. It's like how the law of identity is different to the existence axiom. I think they're different in a similar way.
Okay.
Right, but they can imply, there's an implication there, right? Like, for instance,
Yeah, I think it's an if and only if. I think
Yeah.
the sky is blue if and only if
Exactly.
you should believe that the sky is blue.
Yeah, exactly.
I might accept that. I don't. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, like, here's the way I understand the relationship of norms to epistemology. So of course, epistemology starts out, I guess. Actually, I can't even say that. I mean, the thing about philosophy is that it's an integrated whole. So, like, think about it like this: whenever you're constructing an epistemology, like whenever you're trying to weigh them against each other, you're using epistemic norms. So I mean, it doesn't really make sense to say that epistemic norms can be divorced from epistemology.
Are you just saying that there's a motivation to seek knowledge and that's the underlying norm?
Oh yeah, so
To
this
make
gets into what I was saying.
evaluation on the right epistemology, yeah, you're gonna need.
That's the basis of epistemology.
So yeah, I was
The basis
saying
of epistemic
in the
norms
side
is,
chat,
yeah. I think
there's this,
you can reframe any normative system as like as something prudential, on the grounds that you could say, if you want
Right.
to know true things, then do X, right? And that's your epistemology. And then for ethics, it's if you want to be good, then do X, right?
right. And so, like, here's this subject in philosophy. I was getting at it in side chat. It's called meta normativity. So a lot of people will divorce. They will just completely conceptually isolate moral norms from epistemic norms. But let's understand moral norms, right? Like, why should you do anything such and such? It's for positive emotional experiences. That same kind of normative, source is the same for epistemic oughts too. The reason, I mean, this is my view. This is never said in objectivism. It might be implied, but I mean, my view is that the reason why you should follow epistemic norms is to live a happy life. I mean, like, I don't really know how. Take a calculator, right? Calculators don't have epistemic. I don't see the reason calculators should follow epistemic norms, unless they had something at stake there. So
Calculators are not actors. They can't value things.
yeah,
Say-
that's true.
But like, I think the easy through line here is like, if you don't have valid epistemic norms, you can't draw valid relationships about things in reality. And if you can't do that, you can't make predictions about how your actions will turn out, and therefore you can't have a coherent plan of action to get to things which make you happy. So you can't act in a way that makes you happy. So you can't- there you go.
Truth is so in all theories of ethics, this is the thing. In all theories of ethics, truth is indispensable, right? Because achieving whatever goal it is requires understanding the nature of the world and how to achieve it. So, like, knowledge and truth are indispensable, which then implies that conducting your mind in a certain way to know the truth is also indispensable. And that's the reasoning behind epistemic oughts. It's why subjectivists can't get around it either. Subjectivists still have to reconcile with reality in order to achieve their goals. So there are epistemic oughts. There are oughts.
I've been labeled as a subjectivist who brands himself with a different label.
Okay. What do you mean?
Kill him.
because
mean?
I can't get a binding ought out of you know
Facts.
empirical data,
What do you mean by like a binding ought? I don't.
like a Kantian like
Yeah, you don't.
categorical
Why would
imperative
you?
type thing.
Why would you want something like that? That concept doesn't.
I've had that was like the goalpost he set up, which was like, that's the kind of ought that I'm looking for.
Don't look for
because
that.
I can always disobey your morality, and you can't stop me.
It's like looking for a contradiction. Like it's like there's no reason to do that. Like
Yeah, I guess like the question there's like find a non-conditional ought, right?
Yeah.
And I guess
Right.
it's not really possible. Like even in the case of life as the ultimate standard of value, right? Like the the condition there is that you're alive, right? And that you you have values, right? And there's the thing, like if you don't value life, you can't make statements about value.
It's not
you just have to die.
It's not just living, because there aren't ought claims to plants. It's specifically having motivations to live. That's the ought.
Yeah, it's actors, agents, practical agents.
I mean, what he tried to do is reframe it as an efficiency question.
I've heard. I mean, in some way, ethics is about efficiency, but it's efficiency. This is the difference between an objective view and a subjective view. So, efficient towards what goal, right?
Yeah.
So, like, subjectivists do not evaluate or cannot evaluate goals, but objectivists can.
Like as an engineer, you can't just say efficiency in a vacuum. Like efficiency, you have to optimize for some certain
goal.
Yeah. For some certain end. Like I can optimize an aircraft for maximum aerodynamics or for maximum thrust, or maybe
maximum crashing.
Or maximum crashing. Yeah, we could go play the space program. Yeah, you can optimize like some certain variables, given like some body plan or some situation, right? You have independent and dependent variables, right? And you can optimize your dependent variables, and you can do that, but you can't just say make this efficient. Like there's no efficiency independent of like something to make efficient, some end in mind.
That's just kicking the can down the road. Yeah.
Exactly. So here's the thing that people get. The objectivist subjectivist distinction is like, I think a lot of people treat it. There's like a tendency in objectivism to treat oughts as if they're intrinsic, or then not to understand, and then treat them as subjective. The difference between an objective theory of ethics and a subjective theory of ethics, of course, both are conditional, but it's about being rational about your conditions. So it's not just like anything goes. There are some goals which are ultimate goals, and you should pursue them. But you have to be rational about all that stuff. You have to identify them. That's the difference.
And they're like, well, all right, so life is the standard, right? And then they're like, why can't it be specifically only your life and not but why do you have to include the
what
life
is your
of
life?
others?
It actually is just you. Other people are conditionally valuable to you.
Well, yeah. So like they'll be like, well, what if I'm a psychopath and I don't care?
Well, the problem with psychopathy is like,
or
whenever you say you don't,
if I actually don't have any care for someone, yeah.
The problem is they think that the conditional is all the way through. So, yeah, it's the fact that conditions are bound by reality. The conditional is open to you. You have one fundamental condition open to you, and it's living or not living, right? And when you choose to live, you do that because of your motivation. So your ultimate value is really a life of enjoyment. Okay. Now you can say, well, values are conditional, so I'm gonna go. I have the goal to molest lots of people, right? But I mean that conditional is inconsistent with your prior requirements. So you're being irrational there. So It's not like you can just set the goal and you're good. You have to reconcile your goals with the facts of reality.
Yeah. I suppose.
Well, guys, this was an
The
awesome
challenge
conversation.
is in-
I need to actually check out, but I really appreciate the conversation. Zulu, thanks for debating me, man. I'm glad to be on the server. If anybody wants to talk with me or, you know, have a conversation about any of this stuff, which I'd love to, just message me and then I'd love to, like, you know, set up a discussion. But I'm looking forward to, you know, talking to you guys, talking to Zulu more often.
We're gonna track you
Yeah, no
down. We're
worries.
gonna
Take
build
care.
Hume's guillotine outside your front door. You know, you're
Yeah.
gonna open your front door and you're gonna see the actual Hume's guillotine. It's right
Oh,
there.
shit.
Real
All right.
quick,
Wait, why
Liam,
can't death be the standard of value?